If you're a magician, I've got a message for you. Stop performing tricks. I know that sounds kind of weird, but in this video, I'm gonna explain everything. Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a kind of tutorial video. But today, I'm not going to be teaching you any tricks. I have taught a lot of tricks here on YouTube and on the Magician Club, but something I have never delved into is routines. The structure of routines, how to put together and perform a routine, which is something I was never taught when I started to learn magic. I was never told how to do this. I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. And so this video is compiling 10 years of knowledge of me messing up and getting it wrong and eventually learning how to get it right. I'm gonna give you all of my best pieces of advice when it comes to making a routine, which if you want to perform good magic, you just have to do. Like, you have to understand this. Which is why at the start of the video, I said stop performing tricks. Because too often, I see magicians who just perform tricks. They come to a table, they come to wherever they're performing, and they perform a trick. And then they perform another trick. And then they perform another trick. And they're great, the tricks on their own are fantastic, but there's no link, there's no story, and the gaps in between those tricks are essentially excuses for the audience to zone out. This is how to keep your audience engaged with your magic, which ultimately is what we want, right? We want our audiences to not only pay attention to what we're doing, but be hanging on our every word and be begging for the next trick to come along. And so in this video, I'm gonna teach you how to do that. But first, we have to go right the way back to the basics. What is a magic routine? Okay, so this is a trick. Really doesn't matter what the trick is, but this represents a trick. There is no single definition of what encapsulates a magic trick. Obviously, there are lots of different things that it could be, and there might be more than one magical moment within the trick, but essentially it is one single effect that an audience member could describe to someone else. Now let's throw a couple of other tricks into the mix. We now have 3 separate tricks, obviously, and it doesn't really matter what they are, but let's say they are very, very different. We'll go for an any card, any number effect. We will go for a ring disappearing and reappearing in my wallet, let's say. That's a trick I've done in the past. And why can't I think of any of the tricks? Linking rubber bands, we'll go for those 3 tricks. I've chosen ones that are very, very different and use entirely different props. We've got a card trick, a ring/wallet trick, and rubber bands, okay? 3 disparate tricks. I could approach a group of people and perform one of those after another, and that'd be okay. But it doesn't really go anywhere. They feel like 3 very separate moments, and like I said earlier, the gaps in between those tricks where I put one prop away and bring out the others are excuses for the audience members to leave. Without changing the structure, there's no feasible way of performing those 3 separate effects and having them feel like one experience, having that feel like one routine that they can tell people about. If an audience member were to tell their friend about the magician they saw, the chances are they would just pick one of those tricks, the most memorable or the most recent or the most impressive. They would just pick one. Like I said earlier, the gaps in between those tricks are basically excuses for them to zone out, or if you're performing on the street, if you're busking, where you really have to keep your audience engaged, they might just walk off. If you're not giving them a reason to stay and watch you perform, if they see the end of one trick and the props go away, in their mind, oh, it's over. Okay, right, that was good. Yep, see you later. So here is my first piece of advice on how to avoid this problem. And it's called opening and closing the loop, or just looping for short. Essentially, you're never really gonna stop performing magic. The props themselves are going to overlap into different tricks. So let's say we're performing the any card, any number effect first. We incorporate the rubber bands into the any card, any number effect. We wrap them around the deck and explain that that means the cards can't go anywhere, you can't tamper with the deck, whatever it is. So just before the climax of the acorn, you take off the rubber bands, you give them to an audience member and say, we'll come back to those later. And then you do the finish of the any card, any number. And immediately, you already have the rubber bands out, someone's holding onto them, so boom, you go straight into the rubber band trick. The trick just flows seamlessly from an acorn trick to a rubber band trick without the awkward moment of putting one thing away and bringing out something else. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just hand out the prop for the final trick right at the start. That'll be the thing that I start with. I'll come to the table, I will give someone the prop for the last trick, and I will say, we will come to that later. and then I simply get on with my other tricks that use entirely different props. And now the audience have got an anchor point. They know that at some point I'm going to be using the prop I've given to this audience member. They don't know what I'm going to do, but they know that's where it's going. So all this fun stuff is just building up to that ultimate end trick. Another simple way of doing this, and the card magicians are going to love this one, is by quite simply having the same prop in all three of your tricks. I'm talking here about using completely different props in all your tricks, but maybe that's not your style. What I will say is still have that anchor point. And the anchor point doesn't have to be a physical prop, right? It might be you have a box that eventually their signed card ends up in and you want to hand that out at the start to give your audience a visual cue of where the routine is going. But it might be a verbal cue. You might just say at the start, at the end of this trick, I will blah, 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 whatever it is that you're gonna do. So they're not sat there thinking, right, one trick and then another trick and then another trick, where's this going? You never want the audience to think, when's this gonna end? You want the audience to think, what is the end gonna be? You know, which is a different question. They're hooked and they're excited for the end rather than kind of trying to guess when it's gonna happen. A nice way of doing this that applies to all styles of magic is the cyclical structure? Can't speak. Cyclical structure. This is where the routine essentially is a circle. You finish with something similar to what you started with, but even more impressive. So you add an extra layer of it and it just brings the routine full circle, and yet it tops what you did last time. You can't just do the same trick again, it has to top it. Psychologically, it also tells the audience that this is your finale. Because you're replicating something you did at the beginning, there's just a nice story to it. There's a nice beginning, middle, and end, and it just all feels very complete. Audiences really like this. Whenever I've done it, whenever I've tried it in the past, it always really goes down a treat because it's like, oh wow, you're doing that thing from the start, but wait a second, that is impossible. Okay, I love that. And I know I'm being vague and I'm not giving examples of tricks. And trust me, I'm trying hard to be vague here because I want you to come up with your own ideas. I don't just want to give you the tricks because it's up to you what the tricks are. Just talking about the cyclical structure has reminded me of something that I think you should do with routines in general. And it might sound obvious, but your finale, your last trick, should be your most impressive trick. Your routine should crescendo to the best trick. And yeah, it does sound obvious, but I was at a restaurant not long ago where there was a magician at the table and his first trick was by far his best trick. It was all downhill from there. And that's not offensive. His other tricks were good. They were great, in fact, but his first trick was by far the best. And that was the one we were still talking about at the end of the evening. Now, if that trick had been at the end, that would have been perfect. It would have been the perfect way to finish, but it just felt in the wrong order, and even other people who weren't magicians could tell that. Painters don't paint for other painters, and filmmakers don't make films for other filmmakers. And likewise, magicians shouldn't be making routines for other magicians. Very rarely, anyway. We should be making it for audience members. And if audience members feel that something isn't right, like the tricks are good but they're in the wrong order, something doesn't feel right, then it's not right. We're doing it for the audience, and if the audience can tell something's off, then it's off. Ask your audience. Be a human being. Say, look guys, I'll level with you. This is the first time I've done this trick. What do you think? Is it any good? Now, a lot of the time you will get people being polite and going, oh yeah, it was great. Get through that and be like, no, seriously, what do you think? What can I improve the next time I do this? You know, try and frame the question negatively so that the audience can actually be honest with you and say, okay, well, I think your first trick was the best. I think you should finish with that. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the thumbs up button down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you enjoyed this style of video, this is more along the sort of lines of what I do on the Magician Club, where I make more advice videos and I make stuff that maybe isn't the most clickable stuff in the world, but it's the most workable stuff, it's the most practical stuff, it's the best advice I have to offer, it's the best tricks that I can teach, and it is just $15 a month. And for that, you get more than 120, yes, 120 masterclasses, tutorials, lectures, so much material over there. And for just $15 more per month, you get my entire written library, which is worth well over 10 times the price of entry. So that is the Magician Club and the Inner Circle, both of which you can find at themagician.club if you want to sign up today. And one last thing I want to tell you about is my show that I have. I've got a show that is on the 19th of October. It is in Manchester in the UK. If you can come along and see me perform magic live, that would be incredible. Thank you to everyone who have bought tickets so far, more than 50 50% of the tickets have sold, so they are selling fast. I cannot wait to share with you this creation. The Honest Psychic is a show that I've kind of been dreaming up in my head for years now, and I cannot believe that I'm actually going to perform it on stage. And hey, there may even be a bit of a cyclical structure or a bit of prop overlap, but please don't be making notes in the performance. Just sit back and enjoy it. Okay, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care.